The crashing waves outside the Malibu beach house have always served as a soothing, picturesque backdrop for the Spencer family, a place of quiet refuge and hopeful romantic beginnings. However, the rhythmic, indifferent sound of the ocean has now transformed into a haunting soundtrack for the darkest and most terrifying chapter of Will Spencer's young life. Drowning in a suffocating abyss of depression and heavy alcohol consumption, Will has become a tragic ghost haunting the halls of his own home. The devastating, permanent loss of Electra Forrester, who severed their relationship after witnessing his violent outburst against RJ and Eric Forrester, has left Will utterly shattered and devoid of hope. He has spent his days and nights surrounded by empty amber bottles, agonizingly replaying the catastrophic mistakes that cost him the woman he truly loved. The beach house, once a beautiful sanctuary of youth and romance, is now a dark prison of regret, heavily permeated by the stale scent of bourbon and the crushing, inescapable weight of the ongoing corporate blood feud between Logan Creations and Forrester Creations. Will is a young man teetering dangerously on the absolute edge of oblivion, stripped of his dignity, his love, and his fundamental sense of self-worth. Into this deeply toxic atmosphere of profound vulnerability steps Melissa Dillon. For weeks, Dillon has masterfully played the role of the supportive, innocent confidant, the sweet and understanding friend who was simply there to pick up the pieces of Will's shattered heart. But beneath that carefully constructed, flawless facade of innocence lay a calculating, ambitious, and utterly ruthless opportunist who had set her sights firmly on the immense wealth and power of the Spencer dynasty. Dillon had waited patiently in the shadows for the perfect moment to strike, capitalizing on Will's drunken, heartbroken despair to orchestrate an intimate night of passion on the very sofa where he once dreamed of a bright future with Electra. She knew with absolute certainty that Will was emotionally compromised, his judgment severely clouded by blinding grief and heavy intoxication, making him the ideal, defenseless pawn in her ruthless game of social climbing and financial security. The sweet, timid assistant who once cowered under Electra's tyrannical demands at Forrester Creations has completely vanished, replaced by a cold, strategic predator ready to claim her ultimate prize at any cost. The suffocating tension in the dimly lit beach house reaches a terrifying, explosive boiling point when Dillon returns, her demeanor entirely stripped of its former warmth and manufactured empathy. She does not come offering comfort, solace, or a sympathetic listening ear. She comes wielding a weapon of absolute, life-altering destruction. With a chillingly calm and triumphant expression, Dillon presents Will with a pregnancy test, the two stark lines glaring up at him like an inescapable death sentence. The air in the room instantly evaporates as Will stares at the plastic stick, his alcohol-addled brain struggling violently to process the sheer magnitude of the nightmare unfolding before him. Dillon coldly informs him that their single night of drunken vulnerability has resulted in a pregnancy, a meticulously calculated lie designed to trap the Spencer heir in an inescapable web of legal obligation and public scandal. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of her deceit is a masterclass in psychological manipulation, perfectly tailored to prey upon Will's deepest, darkest fears and his family's highly precarious public standing. For Will, the sight of that fake pregnancy test triggers a violent, visceral, and paralyzing flashback to the most profoundly traumatic period of his entire life. The room violently spins as the terrifying ghost of Luna Nozawa suddenly materializes in his fragile mind. Luna, the deranged serial killer who had previously drugged him, violated his consent, and subsequently trapped him with a horrifying fake pregnancy scare, had nearly destroyed his sanity and his life. The psychological parallels are inescapable, sickening, and profoundly triggering. Will looks at Dillon, truly looking at the woman standing before him for the first time, and the horrifying realization crashes over him like a devastating tidal wave. She is not a friend, and she is certainly not a comfort. She is a terrifying mirror image of Luna Nozawa, a ruthless, calculating, remorseless gold digger who views him not as a human being worthy of love, but merely as a walking bank account and a golden ticket to high society. The profound, sickening betrayal slices cleanly through his drunken haze, igniting a dangerous spark of pure, unadulterated Spencer fury deep within his chest. Dylan, however, is entirely unfazed by the dawning horror and rising anger reflecting in Will's bloodshot eyes. She has meticulously planned every single step of this ruthless extortion, anticipating his inevitable panic and heavily relying on his desperate need to protect his family's fragile, newly repaired reputation. With the cold, unfeeling ruthlessness of a seasoned blackmailer, Dylan issues her devastating, non-negotiable ultimatum. Will must immediately agree to a secret, legally binding wedding, securing her permanent status and financial future as a Spencer, or she will take her sensational pregnancy story straight to the most ruthless Los Angeles tabloids. She expertly and maliciously weaponizes the ongoing, vicious corporate blood feud between Ridge Forrester and Bill Spencer, sharply reminding Will that Logan Creations is currently navigating a highly volatile, dangerous public relations minefield. Katie Logan and Bill Spencer have just launched their new fashion house amidst a massive storm of controversy and Forrester outrage. A scandalous, highly publicized out-of-wedlock pregnancy involving the notoriously unstable Spencer heir and a Forrester employee would be the catastrophic, fatal blow that could permanently destroy his mother's company before it even truly begins. The sheer, breathtaking cruelty of Dylan's blackmail forces Will into a suffocating, inescapable corner. She is aggressively demanding that he sacrifice his entire future, his fundamental freedom, and any lingering, desperate hope of ever redeeming himself in Elektra's eyes, all to save face for a family that has already demanded so much of his loyalty. Dylan produces a blank marriage certificate, the crisp white paper looking entirely sinister and out of place amidst the emotional chaos of the beach house, and violently demands his signature. She paints a terrifying, vivid picture of the media frenzy that will inevitably ensue if he refuses, detailing exactly how she will publicly portray him as a violent, reckless, entitled monster who cruelly took advantage of her and then heartlessly abandoned his unborn child. The threat is incredibly potent, specifically calculated to exploit the existing, damaging narrative surrounding Will's recent violent outbursts against RJ and Eric Forrester. Dylan knows perfectly well that the public, the media, and the police are already primed and willing to view Will as the ultimate villain of the story. As the crushing weight of her threats settles over his shoulders, the intoxicating, numbing haze of the bourbon is violently burned away by a massive surge of overwhelming, toxic resentment. Will's mind races frantically with the agonizing, humiliating memories of the past few weeks. He vividly remembers the crushing humiliation of being banished from the Forrester mansion by a furious Eric, the agonizing, soul-destroying pain of Elektra throwing her necklace at him and choosing the safety of RJ, and the suffocating pressure from his father, Bill, to simply treat his profound heartbreak as acceptable collateral damage in a corporate war. He has lost absolutely everything: his career, his reputation, the profound love of his life, and now, this manipulative, deceitful impostor is attempting to steal the very last thing he has left, his autonomy and his future. The sheer injustice of it all is a sharp, physical ache in his bones. He is being brutally punished for his loyalty, punished for a single night of drunken weakness, and punished by a woman who is wearing the comforting skin of a friend while harboring the dark, ravenous heart of a predator. Sensing his internal hesitation and mistaking his shock for submission, Dylan makes a fatal, catastrophic miscalculation. Empowered by her perceived, imminent victory and deeply intoxicated by the tantalizing proximity of the vast Spencer fortune, she begins to openly and viciously mock him. Her voice, previously soft, understanding, and reassuring, takes on a sharp, grating, and incredibly cruel edge of condescension. She laughs loudly at his pathetic, unwavering devotion to Elektra, cruelly taunting him about how easily and quickly the Forrester princess discarded him for the comforting safety of RJ's arms. Dylan ruthlessly ridicules his powerlessness, his pathetic inability to control his own violent temper, and his complete reliance on his family's immense wealth to shield him from the severe consequences of his reckless actions. She meticulously and sadistically dissects every single insecurity he harbors, twisting the emotional knife with a dark pleasure that reveals the true, terrifying depths of her malice. She tells him that he is absolutely nothing without the Spencer name, a weak, violent, pathetic boy who could not even keep the woman he loved, and who is now entirely, permanently at the mercy of the lowly assistant he once overlooked. The intense psychological warfare echoing off the walls of the beach house pushes Will to the absolute, terrifying brink of his sanity. Every cruel, venomous word Dylan spits at him acts as a potent catalyst, rapidly accelerating the volatile, dangerous chemical reaction of profound grief, heavy alcohol, and deep-seated Spencer rage bubbling fiercely in his veins. He demands that she leave immediately, his voice trembling with a terrifying, barely contained fury, but Dylan completely refuses to yield or retreat. She steps aggressively closer, invading his personal space, her eyes gleaming with a manic, triumphant, and highly dangerous light. She boldly dares him to do something about his anger. She explicitly and maliciously taunts his well-documented history of violence, specifically mocking the brutal punch that gave the elderly Eric Forrester a black eye, and openly challenges him to unleash that same violent monster on her. "What are you going to do, Will? Hit me?" she sneers, her voice dripping with venomous, unchecked arrogance. "Go ahead. Give the press another reason to crucify you. Give Electra another reason to be completely disgusted by you." It is in that precise, agonizing, and fatal fraction of a second that the final, fraying thread of Will Spencer's self-control violently and irreversibly snaps. The massive accumulation of emotional trauma, the sickening betrayal, the suffocating blackmail, and the sheer, unadulterated cruelty of her relentless mockery completely overwhelm his rational, logical mind. He is no longer the privileged, educated son of Bill and Katie. He is a cornered, deeply wounded animal fighting desperately for his very survival against a ruthless predator who is actively trying to consume his life. Driven by a blind, primal, and overwhelming instinct to escape her suffocating presence and permanently silence the venomous, mocking taunts spilling from her lips, Will violently lashes out. It is not a calculated, strategic strike, nor a premeditated, malicious attack, but a desperate, incredibly forceful shove fueled by weeks of repressed agony and the explosive, unpredictable volatility of his Spencer DNA. He throws his hands forward, pushing Dylan away with a sudden surge of adrenaline-fueled strength that he does not even realize he possesses. The terrifying sequence of events that immediately follows seems to unfold in a horrifying, agonizingly slow motion, forever burning itself into the darkest, most traumatizing corners of Will's memory. Dylan, caught entirely and completely off guard by the sudden, explosive violence of his physical reaction, loses her footing on the polished hardwood floor. Her arms flail wildly and desperately as she stumbles backward, her triumphant, arrogant sneer instantly morphing into an expression of sheer, unadulterated panic and terror. The beach house, usually filled with the soft, comforting ambient noise of the ocean, is suddenly consumed by the terrifying sound of her desperate, failing struggle for balance. She falls backward with terrifying speed, her body twisting awkwardly and dangerously in the air, completely unable to break her rapid descent. The exact trajectory of her fall is a cruel, unforgiving, and fatal stroke of fate, sending her directly toward the heavy, solid oak coffee table that sits immovably in the center of the living room. The sickening, hollow, and devastating crack of Melissa Dillon's skull violently colliding with the sharp, unyielding wooden edge of the table echoes through the beach house like a deafening gunshot. It is a sound so incredibly final, so devastatingly brutal, that it instantly shatters the manic, chaotic energy of the room, replacing it with a suffocating, absolute, and terrifying silence. Dylan's body goes entirely limp upon impact, crumpling to the floor in a lifeless, unnatural, and deeply disturbing heap. The fake pregnancy test, and the unsigned marriage certificate flutter harmlessly to the ground, landing softly beside her motionless form like cruel, mocking confetti celebrating the destruction of two lives. For a long, agonizing moment, the only sound in the entire room is the ragged, panicked, and desperate gasping of Will's own breath as he stands completely frozen, his hands still outstretched, his mind violently and desperately rejecting the horrifying reality of what he has just done. The intoxicating, numbing haze of the bourbon instantly evaporates from Will's bloodstream, completely replaced by a massive surge of pure, paralyzing terror that turns his blood to absolute ice. He drops heavily to his knees beside Dylan, his hands trembling violently and uncontrollably as he hovers over her completely motionless body. The cruel, calculating, and victorious gold digger who had been mercilessly tormenting him only seconds ago is entirely gone, replaced by a fragile, broken, and silent figure bleeding onto his expensive rug. He calls her name repeatedly, his voice cracking with a desperate, pleading, and terrified hysteria, but there is absolutely no response, no movement, no sign of life. Her eyes are closed, her face is frighteningly pale, and a terrifyingly dark, thick pool of crimson blood begins to slowly spread from beneath her head, staining the floorboards and permanently sealing his horrific, inescapable fate. The silence of the beach house is no longer a comforting sanctuary. It is a dark, suffocating tomb, and he is the sole architect of its sudden destruction. As Will stares in absolute horror at the blood pooling around Dylan's head, the true, apocalyptic magnitude of his irreversible actions crashes down upon him with the devastating force of a collapsing building. He has not just pushed a manipulative, lying blackmailer. He has committed an act of severe, potentially fatal violence that will permanently and irrevocably alter the entire trajectory of his existence. The horrifying, inescapable realization that he has crossed an ultimate, unforgivable line completely paralyzes his body and mind. He vividly remembers Ridge Forrester's furious, condemning accusations, the public branding of him as a dangerous, unhinged monster after the unfortunate incident at the bikini bar. He remembers the look of absolute horror, fear, and disgust on Electra's beautiful face when she permanently ended their relationship. They had all warned him about his uncontrollable temper. They had all seen the dangerous darkness lurking beneath his privileged exterior, and in this single, catastrophic moment, he has proven every single one of his harsh detractors absolutely, unequivocally right. The legal and moral abyss yawning wide open beneath Will's trembling feet is unfathomably deep and terrifying. If Melissa Dillon is dead, or even severely, permanently brain damaged, he is facing years, perhaps decades, locked away in a state penitentiary. The vast Spencer wealth and dollar bills army of high-priced legal fixers cannot simply erase a bleeding body on the floor of his living room. The sensational media frenzy that Dillon had threatened with her fake pregnancy will pale in comparison to the apocalyptic, world-ending firestorm of a homicide or attempted murder investigation. The devastating headlines write themselves. Billionaire heir Will Spencer brutally attacks Forrester employee. The massive scandal will not merely be a profound personal tragedy. It will be a weapon of mass destruction aimed directly at the very heart of the newly formed Logan Creations. Katie Logan, who has already sacrificed her relationship with her sister Brooke and risked absolutely everything to build her new fashion empire, will see her life's work completely incinerated by the violent, reckless actions of her own son. The crushing guilt of destroying his mother's dreams is a physical, agonizing weight on Will's chest. Furthermore, the complex geopolitical landscape of the Los Angeles fashion families will be violently and permanently ruptured by this tragedy. Ridge Forrester, who has already declared an all-out, unforgiving blood feud against the Spencer family, will undoubtedly use this horrific event to permanently annihilate them in the press and in the boardroom. The Forrester clan will fiercely rally around the narrative that Will is a sociopathic, violent menace, validating their every prejudice and ensuring that the Spencer name is forever synonymous with brutal, unprovoked violence. And then there is the impending, terrifying, an unpredictable variable of Darcy Dillon. Melissa's fiercely protective, highly formidable mother is scheduled to arrive in Los Angeles imminently.